In this video, I'm going to talk about the Holocaust. I'm going to talk about where the Holocaust comes from, and I'm going to talk about how it's able to happen. The Holocaust, of course, is the slaughter of 6 million Jews and about 1 million other people who were considered political or racial threats to the Nazis. So the Holocaust stems from Nazi racism, specifically Nazi anti-Semitism, hatred of the Jews, and also more broadly from social Darwinism, the idea that human evolution is something that humans today can understand and can coordinate, and that certain races are superior to others, or certain bloodlines are superior to others and should be promoted, the others should be exterminated. As they come to power, we find the Nazis establishing camps where they terrorize and imprison political enemies, but also those who are considered enemies simply by virtue of their race. And they continue to carry out acts of terror against the Jews as they become more and more powerful in German society. After the conquest of Poland, and then again after the conquest of Russia, the Germans find themselves in power over increasingly large Jewish populations, because there are large Jewish populations in Poland and in Russia. At least initially, the Jews were herded into ghettos, parts of the city where they were forced to live, where they received limited supplies of food, where they worked was determined by the Germans. And when the Germans felt that they had grouped all of the Jews from a particular region together into a ghetto, that would be when they would move in and they would ship these Jews off to concentration camps, where they would work them basically until they died. Sometimes during the war, you could find as many as 700,000 Jews would be working in these concentration camps at the same time. This is also the period where we see the Germans start to carry out scientific experiments on these prisoners. And this is really sort of the infatuation with science that we've been looking at for a number of months, weeks now in this course, taken to crazy levels. This is the point where science has taken over humanity. So we have these work camps where Jews are being worked to death. We also have killing squads that the Germans put together, that they send out behind the German army into Russia to exterminate Jews and other ethnic minorities who they want to exterminate in Russia. As I said before, this is more of a genocidal war than the wars in Western Europe. Sometime around late 1942 and into 1943, the Germans decide to move towards what becomes known as the final solution. That Jews will no longer as much be worked to death, although there will still be labor camps as well, but that there will be camps established precisely to kill Jews. And the Jews will be killed by the use of showers that release poisonous gases. The Jews would be herded in there. The Germans wouldn't tell them what was happening. They would simply be herded into these rooms, packed as tight as possible, and then the Germans would turn on the gas. And after about 20 minutes, all the Jews would be dead. And one of the most grotesque aspects of this slaughter would be that other Jewish prisoners working in these camps would then be sent in to basically harvest the corpses. That the Germans wanted to harvest the hair of Jewish women, and they wanted to harvest in particular gold fillings from the teeth of those who had died. And so this is another way in which the Germans are not only killing the Jews, but also using these bodies and using these people who have died. This, it seems, becomes something of an obsession for the Nazi regime, even towards the end of the war, even towards a point where we find that the German military forces are in desperate need of military supplies, that trains carrying Jews to death camps, carrying Jews to be exterminated, are still given priority along the train tracks. That this was considered, killing Jews was considered more important than resupplying German armies at the front. And we find that in some of these death camps, as many as 8,000 Jews a day were being killed when they were operating at their fullest capacity. In the final days before the end of the war, we have records of frantic efforts on the part of the Nazis to cover up the Holocaust, to kill all the survivors so they wouldn't be able to tell what had happened, to destroy and shred any paperwork records, to burn any evidence of the Holocaust. To me, this is very revealing. I think this is very revealing of what a lot of human beings do on different scales. That deep down the Germans know that Germans who have been involved in this know that it's something wrong, but it's something that they're able to get away with. It's something that they increasingly become desensitized to. But deep down, there's always this knowledge that they're doing something wrong. And when they're about to be called to account, there's this panic to try and cover it up and to pretend that it didn't happen. The last aspect of the Holocaust that I want to talk about in this video is complicity. This is a question that people increasingly ask about the Holocaust. How was this allowed to happen? Does this mean that every German in Germany knew that the Holocaust was going on and did nothing to stop it? Or how did they try and stop it? And we know that there was a German resistance to Hitler and to the Nazis. We know also that all of these death camps and most of the concentration camps were located outside of Germany. And that's because the smell of burning flesh, so once the Jews had been gassed and killed through gas, the bodies would be burned. The smell of the burning flesh was too pungent, too noticeable, too oppressive. And so the Nazis were trying to hide this by locating these camps outside of Germany. So these are kind of mitigating factors to how complicit members of the German population were. But we also have to acknowledge that many Germans at all levels of society, even down to the male staff, who turned over lists of Jews, lists of people who were registered as Jews to the Nazis, knew that they were complicit in something that was going on. They almost certainly didn't know the full details, the full horror of the Nazi program, but they knew that no Jews were coming back from these camps. And so that is a way in which the Holocaust was introduced kind of stealthily, and a way in which it was introduced in such a way that didn't inconvenience, didn't really kind of slap the German population in the face with what was going on, and enabled people to turn a blind eye to this, to not seek out what was going on, to not try and protest what was going on. And this is something always to keep in mind as citizens in the modern world, what is going on that we are not aware of, or that's kind of going on under the surface that we should be aware of, that's maybe being normalized, that isn't being normalized. Again, the soldiers who carry out a lot of these slaughters, we have accounts that speak about how outside of these massacres that they carried out, they're ordinary soldiers who have families, who care about their families, and somehow are able to convince themselves to distance the way they look after their families and their friends with the executions that they're carrying out on such a regular basis. Again, the horror of this and the cautionary tale of this is that ordinary people can very easily be pressured into doing monstrous acts if the government is encouraging them to do so, or if the prevailing peer pressure at the time is encouraging them to do so. And this is true of other populations as well. We know that the countries that the Germans conquered, many of them had anti-Semitic aspects to the culture themselves, and were willing to turn over Jews to the Nazis to be slaughtered. Maybe they didn't want to be involved in the killing, but they did nothing to prevent the Nazis from carrying out this campaign, and sometimes even help them. Even we find this among the Jewish population. There are Jews who could be convinced to help the Nazis carry out this program in exchange for slightly better conditions in the camp, that they would basically go to work for the Nazis. And again, this is just to reiterate this cautionary aspect in learning about the Holocaust, what we can take away from this event, that many people who are ordinary people who wouldn't do terrible things on their own account, unless they have very strong moral convictions, can very easily be pressured into doing horrific acts.